All right. What's going on? Inna alhamdulillah wa kafa. Bismillah, people, bismillah. Right, this, I thought, why not? Let's get a, let's get a live stream going, people. Why not? I've rewired all of the machinery that we've got here, so hopefully it's a great opportunity to test out how this is going. We've got with us Imam Maz, who's we've had.
Assalamu alaikum, Mufti, and assalamu alaikum to the viewers. Jazakallah khairan for giving me this opportunity.
Right, there you go. Alright, people. Alright. So, Sheikh, I hope the reason one first of all, just for the viewers as well, one of the main reasons why I did want to get in a session tonight, even if it is a very late one, is one that I mean, it's twofold. One, that there were certain issues that I thought, you know what, we could actually, um, it would be awesome if we could get through some of them, even if it's quite brief, especially to do with Ramadan, to do with things like some of the issues going on in some parts of the Muslim world. Get Imam Maz's views on that. And secondly, I wanted to also make sure that since I've changed around on this end, you guys can't see it, but all of the equipment, I want to make sure that it is flowing as well. So it is the purple Imam who is back. That's absolutely correct. Alright. So, Imam Maz, first of all, how are things on your end? What's going on? How, since our last dialogue, what's the feedback been like? What's the criticisms?
Oh man, I'm torn apart by just being on you with your on your show, but alhamdulillah, it makes you stronger. You got to sort of get out of this whole sectarian mindset, do what's better for the people, understand what matters most, and just go on. People will hate forever. They've been hating in the past. They'll continue to hate. That doesn't change anything. If there are actually genuine individuals amidst you, or people who are connected to you who actually appreciate what you're doing, and what the efforts that you're bringing about to bring a betterment. So alhamdulillah, still in quarantine. I'm planning to make a long drive through the mountains and valleys from one end of Canada to the other. So that's what I'm sort of preparing for on Saturday. Going to leave Toronto, head up north, where there are some very beautiful gorges, Thunder Bay.
Okay, you had us worried there for a moment with all. You're heading right up to some beautiful, gorgeous.
Gorgeous. Yeah, from there to the mountains of Alberta, from the mountains of Alberta to where my wife Sham is and my daughter.
Okay,
BC,
mashallah.
beautiful
Alright, we've got Sheikh slightly freezing out there. I take it the connection coming in and out.
Yeah.
Alright, look at that, shrinking.
Yeah, it's the connection.
Alright, so what's some of the criticisms that you've had, Sheikh? What's been going on? Why are people giving you a hard time for coming on this show?
I'll tell you why. It's backwards logic. I'm no one to give you a sense of legitimacy, but they're saying that if you get on with Mufti Abu Layth, you're legitimacy in the public. I'm like, what the hell are you saying? He's already.
All right, people. Is that how it goes down? Is that how I gain my legitimacy?
accepted madaris.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So
So in terms of the, we've got. You see, this was a great time to test out my equipment.
Scholars, even in the past, they might have not agreed. Yeah.
I was just saying, I said
The scholar. Sorry, what's happening?
No, it's just, I think it's your internet connection. That's all.
The feed is cutting, Mufti. The feed is sort of cutting off.
Yeah, it's. Can you hear me? I was saying that it's a great, a great time. I'm trying to try out my equipment, and the internet connection on that end is is fading, but let's see if we still got the Imam with us, unless it's been. Imam Saab, you're back. Ahlan wa sahlan, man.
Yeah,
what's going down, man? What's going down? I think it is the connection, I think, on your end. So, yep, I think it is the connection on your end, Imam Saab. But okay, not to. I think.
So I was just saying,
fix itself
you don't necessarily have to agree with all the opinions of a certain scholar when you yourself may be a scholar or a student of knowledge. Even in the Hanafi fiqh, you look at some of the books of the students of, say, Imam Abu Hanifa, they would mention, and I'm sure it's the same for the Maliki madhab and other madhahib as well, they would say, هذا قول أبي حنيفة ولا نأخذ به. Right, it's fine to differ, but
Imam
that
Muhammad
sense of
does that a lot in his.
Of course,
Yeah.
He overdoes it. So another issue which was brought up was the whole takfir issue, and I'm still sort of trying to defend that up till now. I gave up about 2 days ago, trying to sort of defend Mufti Abu Layth from the takfir of people.
What do you mean? They're trying to. They're stating that I am a kafir. Is that what the issue is?
Yeah, some indicate that you're وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ a kafir وَأَنْتَ بَرِيءٌ مِّن ذَلِكَ.
Oh well, if it helps them, what the hell? What difference does it make to me? It makes zero difference to me.
I'll tell you what difference it makes. There's a whole psychology behind takfir. Takfir at times, or for the viewers, calling somebody kafir, who has difference of opinions or a difference of opinion than you, calling somebody a kafir sort of protects one's authority from being shut down. Like, I'll give you an example. So, for example, if you call Zayd or Bakr or Amr, the examples that are generally used in the Arabic language, if you call any person a kafir, and you sort of have an audience that follows you, automatically what you're doing is you're cutting those people off from sort of thinking for their own selves. So right when you say Mufti Abu Layth is a kafir, what you're doing to your viewers or what you're doing to your followers is that you're cutting off that connection completely from even people going out of their way to explore what the views of Mufti Abu Layth sort of are, or what Mufti Abu Layth is all about. Of course, this is a broad example that I'm giving. It's sort of like, the qafilat of Hajj, the sort of groups of Hajj who used to come in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Initially, how the Quraysh would prevent them from their rational thinking was by dismissing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a majnoon or a sahir, right? So right when they sort of dismiss Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be a sahir, a magician or a majnoon, people won't automatically think for themselves. They'll just fall into the flow.
To take away credibility.
Yeah, and this this has been done throughout the history of Islam, where a certain group called another group kafir for the sake of protecting authority and that sectarianism that they hold on to. So I really, to be honest, I really go against that whole thought process of just takfiring around and not looking at matters using intellect and rationality and reason.
Yeah, somebody mentioned, the Psychology of Takfir, Freud's lesser-known book.
I agree. Actually, I think there needs to be some writing. Although they might have said it as a joke, but I actually agree that there needs to be a book written about the psychology of takfir. I mean, some takfir may be legitimate, but not takfiring around people for minute reasons.
I've always felt on these issues that my take has been that it is for Muslim scholars, let's say, to highlight that, okay, such and such a belief may be antithetical to Islam.
Yes, of course.
Such and such a thing may or may not, for example, be completely in contrast to this deen. But it's not really our place to be taking people out of the faith, to be kind of bringing them back, to be kind of saying, well, we can bring this person in, but we can't bring that person in. That's not really our remit, it's not the authority given unto us by God.
Of course.
What we're meant to be simply doing when asked on these matters is stating, well, such and such a belief, like let's say shirk now, quite evidently that would be antithetical to Islam. Now things like that, that's it. But I mean, on this notion of I suppose kufar or
just to add a small caveat, Mufti. But when you mention a scholar that they hold in high esteem, having a similar view to, say, the view of Mufti Abu Layth, then they try as much as possible to go through gymnastics and find so many reasons to, dismiss that scholar to be genuine and a great Muslim. But they won't do the same for another scholar who's not linked to their sort of denomination or their sect or their methodology.
Who is linked? Who's not?
They won't do the same thing for somebody who's not linked with their sect. So, for example, I had a whole conversation with certain scholars about Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. And it's like playing pure gymnastics to try to disprove that Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi held such a view of, the second coming being a myth. They try to play into those gymnastics and try to disprove the works of Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi in that regard, and thereby making ta'wil that, he was perfect, he was good to go. As for anyone besides, and actually, this is far from reality. That book is his.
I mean,
right? Even
exactly. And for the people that
even
don't
his
know
contemporaries,
what that is that,
sure, go ahead.
You see, Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi is a very a well-renowned Deobandi scholar from the sub-school of Deoband. I mean, he's incredibly respected and dignified within that kind of madrasa. Now, he is somebody who held the view that there was no second coming of Jesus. Alongside him, another very revered scholar, Abul Kalam Azad. And also...
many.
And also other people that are maybe, not of the same stature as them within the Deobandis, people like Allama Iqbal and a few other scholars, but at least these, like Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi. So people then get a bit weary because he has a book on this topic.
So they sort of say, well, that book is not even his, the book which dismisses the second coming, that's not even his. But that's far from reality. It is his book, and his contemporaries also witness to the fact that Maulana Ubaidullah Sindi did have certain isolated opinions and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, this really comes back to a sense of kind of like thinking outside, thinking outside of the box, trying to,
Of course.
or just evaluating things from your own perspective, a fresh perspective. On that, I know you've had some questions to do with hadith and the
Yeah,
hadith kind of analysis, and that really ties into that debate as well, and as it does with many others, because it comes down to
the whole tawatur debate, right?
because and more, it's that this kind of a belief, let's say, whether it's to do with the second coming of Jesus or other issues,
Yeah.
they are found in hadith literature. So the issue is what kinds of hadith are accepted and what ain't. And I know you've had some questions on this, and you've gone back and forth
Yeah.
with some other people as well.
Just to add another fun fact for the viewers, a lot of great ulama of the past had their takfir made. For example, when you read the Sunnah of Abdullah bin Ahmed bin Hanbal, there are actually narrations that he brings with regards to the takfir of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So that doesn't lessen the value of Imam Abu Hanifa at any cause. There's actually narrations where somebody goes up to a great Imam and asks, what should I approach Abu Hanifa with?
Yeah.
So the Imam responds by saying, قُلْ لَهُ يَا كَافِرْ.
Sorry, who's saying قُلْ لَهُ يَا كَافِرْ?
The Imam is saying to his disciple,
call Imam Abu Hanifa kafir.
Yeah, so this is a very old phenomena. I'm sure a few years down the line, as you mentioned the example with the haircut, people will embrace certain other sort of opinions to be just an ikhtilafi matter, a difference of opinion and nothing more. Things which they are using to call another person kafir, they'll use those same opinions as just opinions which are mere ikhtilaf, just a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of hadith criticism, I was going through the hadith of al-habbat al-sawda, the black seed. And I was writing an article about it when I stumbled upon your video. I wanted to sort of encompass the sanad portion of it in my article, but I came to realize that the muhaddith, or the hadith scholar, the one transmitting the hadith, Yahya ibn Bukair, you made his tad'if, right, in one of the videos?
Yeah, he's actually, it's not actually me making his tad'if.
Of course, you quoted scholars.
Nasa'i and other ulama have kind of really problematized Yahya ibn Bukair.
Yeah, the only reason why I had an issue with this particular hadith was people were circulating this hadith in reference to the COVID-19 and making posters and sort of like WhatsApp images saying that the black seed is an actual remedy, shifa, to the COVID-19. So they were making takhsis. They were actually So I'm like, let me look into the matter. I stumbled upon your video. One criticism, or one question I would say I have, is with regards to this whole deeming a certain rawi, a certain narrator, as weak. The question I have surrounding that is, what if the majority, or a large majority of the muhaddithun have made tawthiq of a certain rawi, and just a few, like, handpicked, like Imam Nasa'i you mentioned, and I believe there were some others who made who deemed them to be weak. What if that is brought up as an objection, that why are you deeming Yahya ibn Bukair as a weak rawi when others have made a great majority have made tawthiq of him?
That is it's a very good question, but when we really want to look at it, my first point would be that, is this a democracy? Is it a democratic approach to declaring somebody reliable, the veritability, the reliableness of an individual. Now, it does make some sense. Fair enough, I understand, and I'll explain this. It does make some sense that the more people that declare somebody an individual, that declare an individual more reliable, can have more weight. You'll probably agree to that. But that said, there's you've heard of great masters of hadith like Abu Hassan ibn Qattan al-Fasi.
Of course,
Right
yes.
now, he highlights that just that it is not permissible for people. He actually highlights the wujub of for scholars, for ulama, to analyze for themselves and pass judgments themselves on isnad. To blindly follow isnad, he deems impermissible. So he will state
Yes.
that, look, you shouldn't just blindly follow just because Bukhari said he's reliable, you therefore follow it just blindly. That he highlights is impermissible. But my point is something greater than that.
Sure.
You see, what I want to highlight is that yes, it's fine that Imam Bukhari has deemed this person to be reliable. Nasa'i hasn't. Other people may have questioned them. Ali al-Madini may have questioned him. Yahya ibn Ma'in may have questioned other ruwat. Yes, there's an ikhtilaf, there's a difference of opinion. But what I want to highlight is that how can we evaluate the strength of something? Like in a chain. So let's say let's say we're looking at a mas'ala of fiqh.
Yeah.
Now, is intention necessary for wudu? So you as an individual today, yeah, there are some background noises. I think it might just be the mic picking up from your side some noises, but you see, that's some of the noise. It's not a jinn, people. But right, so it's the question is that let's say we're talking about wudu. Um, is niyyah, is having an intention an obligation? So what are you gonna do? Like if I ask you, is it an obligation? You know that there's a difference of opinion.
Of course, yes.
So what you're gonna do is, well, okay, let's take a look at what their evidences are. Is that
Yeah.
correct? So you're gonna kind of
Yeah.
say, well, you know, what has this school said? What has that school said? You're going to take a look at, some people have said there's a hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Some people have said this, and you're going to make a call on it. You know, it's going to be your call. Imagine there were no evidences apparent. The only thing you had was just names and opinions. So you had Imam Abu Hanifa saying niyyah is not fard. You had Imam Malik saying niyyah is fard. You had Shafi'i saying niyyah is fard. You had so on. Now, I said to you, evaluate the evidence. Go for it. So, there's that jinn again.
Yeah, so
yeah.
in the case where you say there is no evidence,
Or no,
and it was
whether there is evidence, but it's not available to you.
if it's not available to me,
Yeah.
then I would just make a rational judgment.
Right, okay. So somebody's highlighted also my volume is quite low. I don't know why that is, but right, okay. So when you
would use reason. We would use reason in that case.
Yeah, so that's fine, but what I'm trying to say is how would you do that if I say to you, you've got this ruling, should intention be obligatory in wudu? And you say, well, okay, I want to take a look, and I say, well, this is what you can look at. Abu Hanifa says no, Malik says yes, Shafi'i says yes, Ahmad says yes. Look at it. Now you tell me, what should it be? What should the rule be?
It would be very difficult when one does not have any sort of other resources available to deduce.
Exactly. I mean, that's my point. Exactly. That you see, you need to look at the primary data. It's
which
not
is the
like,
Quran.
of course, or the Quran or the Sunnah or whatever it is, but you need the evidence. You see, if I give you just a summary conclusion, a hukam, if I say to you that, look, you want to make a judgment, here's a judgment, a list of names, and they've yes or no comment. That is it an obligation? Yes. So yes, no, yes.
Sure.
And I say to you that make up your mind. Like, how on earth can you make up your mind based on that?
Very
You need to
difficult to do.
see. It's almost impossible, because all you're simply doing now is just blindly following. You're just gonna take. It's just a shot in the dark. You're just gonna take a pick and say, well, I tell you what, I'll go with Malik. What did he base it on? I don't know.
Just preference, I guess.
So what I'm simply doing is just picking a person and just going with them. Just pure, sheer, blind trust. That's what it is. Now, this is what happens in Hadith studies.
Okay.
You see, because what's really, in fiqh, what really happens is you look at the evidences. So you say, well, the Hanafi madhab says we've based it on this verse of the Quran. It has no mention of niyyah. We've based it on this usuli principle. We've based it on this. The Maliki madhab says we've based it on this verse of the Quran, this evidence, this sunnah.
Yep.
Let's contrast them. That makes more sense to me, or this makes more sense to me. Now, in Hadith, it's impossible to do this in Hadith studies, to do with isnad, chain. So, when I say to you that, look, you ask me, is such and such a person reliable? Yahya ibn Bukayr, Ismail ibn Abi Uwais. Are these people reliable? So,
yeah.
In some cases, we might actually have some story about these guys. In many cases, there isn't even much of a story to them. But what you've got is a lot of people just making a comment on them. So you've got Bukhari now, let's say, saying, oh, yep. You've got Bukhari saying, yep, he's reliable. Now, a question would be that, Bukhari may not have ever seen. In fact, most of the narrators that these people transmit from, whether it's Bukhari, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, all these people who comment, right? These people, most of the narrators they commented on, they've never actually met them.
Okay.
So the question is that, how have they got that judgment? I mean, sure, they must have got it from someone. Because, like, maybe their teachers told them. The problem is, in many of the cases, their teachers have never met those individuals.
But what if they have met?
Yeah, but in most of these cases, like, let's say,
like for example, they're saying حدثنا Mufti.
Yeah.
And that usually entails that the two people, have met, or they have had some connection.
Yes, now that's only with their direct teachers. So when Bukhari or these people may have met Yahya ibn Bukayr, that's fine. But their chain, so Bukhari's chain, will have several people in his chain.
Yeah, of course.
Now, you've got between him and by the time he reaches the Prophet, there's going to be several people in that chain. Now, you can, let's say momentarily you leave out the companions. We're not going to discuss the companions. After the companions, you've got tabi'een, you've got lower class tabi'een, as in those who are still tabi'een but are junior tabi'een. You've got then atba'u tabi'een. Then you've got people who've come after them, who are usually the teachers of people like Bukhari. Yeah? Now the question is, all of these three have usually never been met by people like Imam Bukhari or his kind of peers. They've never met them. So
I understand where you're coming from.
They are saying that, like, so let's say Ibn Shihab Zuhri. Now he passes away something like 124 Hijri. Now, Imam Bukhari would never have met him. Imam Bukhari's teachers would never have really met him. now all these people from that era, Ibn Jurayj, you're gonna have A'mash, you're gonna have all these Qatada, all these people. None of them have ever met them. Neither have they met anybody who's ever met them. So when Bukhari says, or Ahmad ibn Hanbal says, or people like Yahya ibn Ma'in say that this person is reliable or not, we don't know where they're getting their data from.
Okay, so what if, I get that point, but what if people make this sort of democracy or this majority of scholars making tawthiq of a single rawi? What if they use this to give weight to that rawi? And a minority have only criticized that rawi. For example, An-Nasa'i and another few. When we're speaking about the whole hadith regarding the black seed, how do you challenge that then?
I see. I mean, I do see what you're saying. The question now, somebody's commented again on my mic. I don't know if my mic is it coming. By the way, to you, is my audio coming across okay to you?
Yeah.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Fine, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let me just put this up. I'll max this out. See if that makes any. All right. So you see, I understand what you're saying from a democratic viewpoint, but the issue here is that why must that be so when, yes, 4 people are saying that this person is reliable. That's your point, yeah?
Yes, that's my point.
And 2 people are saying, well, or 1 person is saying he's not reliable. So we're going to take the 4 people when the intriguing aspect is, in most of these cases, none of these people have actually met them.
So how do you challenge that? I'm saying, how do you challenge such a phenomenon? So, for example, you're writing a fatwa regarding this aspect of black seed, and you come across narrations where Imam Bukhari has made, say, tawthiq of Yahya ibn Bukayr, or so and so other muhaddith has made tawthiq of Yahya ibn Bukayr. But then while you're doing your research, you find that narration of, say, An-Nasa'i criticizing Yahya ibn Bukayr, and you use that to your advantage. What would you do in the case where people criticize you for doing that based on your whims and desires because you didn't wish for that hadith to sort of hold any value?
What I'm saying, my approach is that in the time of, after the Prophet ﷺ, in the time of the Salaf, it was the matan of a hadith that had the centrality, that had the central position.
Of course, then later on,
this becomes dislodged by this kind of
focusing on the matan
wave of muhaddithin, like the era of Bukhari. That era of muhaddithin centralized the chain. They pushed the matan, which is the meaning, the message, they pushed that to the periphery. Now it's all about the chain. Now, whereas in the first generation, the Salaf, it was all about the matan and the chain was in the periphery. Hence, Imam Malik on many occasions wouldn't even include a complete chain because he felt that it wasn't necessary. It was more about an issue of trust.
Yeah, or Imam Abu Hanifa for that matter, or Muhammad ibn al-Hasan for that matter. A lot of them, for sure.
Exactly. Imam Abu Hanifa was exactly the same. In fact, what is attributed to, they attribute it in the Hanafi Usul book to Imam Abu Hanifa, saying that if the person mentions the chain, then he's put the liability on you, but if he doesn't, then he has actually taken the responsibility upon his own shoulders, and therefore that sanad may be more reliable. So sometimes they kind of give a mursal more precedence over a kind of musnad,
Yeah.
in that sense. Now, coming to this.
Let me flip the question,
Yeah, sure,
Mufti.
sure.
When you say make tad'if of
Yeah.
Yahya ibn Bukair,
Hmm.
and you want to convince others also that this hadith may not be sahih because of Yahya ibn Bukair,
Hmm.
how do you sort of combat the rhetoric that they come with of saying,
Okay.
well, yeah, I flipped the question. So, how would you sort of combat the rhetoric that they're coming with of saying, well, so and so made tawthiq, so and so of his contemporaries made tawthiq of him, so and so, and hence your view is flawed? How
Yeah, but
would
what?
you combat that?
Right. So, but what I am doing is I am showing that such and such a scholar of hadith, who is equally a heavyweight, who is
Uh-huh.
of equal standard to those scholars, has declared him unreliable.
And even if he's the only person to do it, it's fine.
Yeah, because the point is that, you see, you're saying that, well, I'm just following this person because Bukhari said it, and I'm saying, well, here Nasa'i has said this person is weak. Now you could accuse me. You're right. You could say, oh, but we're playing a numbers game, so we've got
Mm-hmm.
more people to say this. Now that's fine, but you can't say I'm obligated to follow your numbers game,
I
because
understand.
there's many occasions where people are where many people have criticized something, but only one person has allowed it, and let's say that person happens to be Bukhari, so you will accept it. There isn't consistency in this numbers game, so you can't
Sure.
obligate others to follow it. Sure, if you want to follow it, that's up to you. My point is, what I'm actually doing is the real game, if you like. The real thing is, I'm once again bringing to the center the matan. I'm
Mm-hmm.
centralizing the matan of the hadith, the actual message, and the chain is on the periphery. I'm kind of turning this on its head once again into its natural form.
So yeah,
So,
you're focusing on the matan more.
right, no, absolutely, because the question is this: even if we go by just sanad, we should have today the tools to be able to assess a chain of hadith based on its true merits, like the way you can assess a fatwa in fiqh
Mm-hmm.
based on the real evidences. But the reality is we can't, because
How would you do that without genuinely knowing those specific rawis? Is that what you're saying?
exactly, because all we have today are the statements of this second wave of muhaddithin scholars,
Yeah.
of like people
Who at
like,
times never even met the initial rawi.
who when it comes to most of the ruwat, they've never
Mm-hmm.
actually met them.
For sure.
So
For sure.
they themselves have kind of like, I mean, they have, I'm not saying buried, but they've not relayed to us who has told them.
Yeah.
So and what if that person who told them made a mistake? You see, it's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. What if, or the person who told that person made a mistake?
Yes.
So
So
we've
when we
got a
say,
huge element of faith here. Like, what we're doing is just basically just saying, well, I'll keep my eyes closed and I'm just trying to reach out for your hand, and that's it.
yeah,
And what I'm saying is, well, actually, we do have a tool to assess hadith in this day and age upon its merits. And that is that, let's read what the hadith actually says.
analyze it.
Then
Yeah.
we weigh it up against the gold standard, which is the
Yeah.
three criteria, which is that it cannot go against reason, it cannot not clash with the
Nah.
Quran, and it cannot uproot Islamic principles. And
Mm-hmm.
if that happens, then fine, it's past the huge bulk of the test. Now we can look at the chain and it's fine, it's not really an issue. But if it fails with the gold standard,
Yep.
then I would say, well, now, okay, it's very likely that somewhere in the chain we can see that something's gone wrong anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my, yeah.
So while studying, say, the matan of the hadith of Al-Habbat Sauda,
Yeah.
one also one also is forced into researching what the Habbat Sauda is actually.
Yeah, this is amazing, because I
So
was
yeah,
asking the same question. I mean, I was just thinking the other day that people, you have a hadith that just says black seed, and everybody
yeah.
assumes they know what it means. But
So of course, nobody would say that it has been proved through tawatur, through perpetual evidence, that the black seed is what we sort of hold to be the black seed. In fact, even among the muhaddithun of the past, there was a difference. For example, Hassan Basri, rahimahullah, said that the black seed is the khardal, the mustard seed. People
and
like
just to make a comment here, somebody had said, was all that discussion for the black seed? No, it wasn't. That discussion was to do with my methodology that has been questioned. I've been asked on so many occasions that how dare you question a hadith that people like Bukhari have said is sahih, and just because Nasa'i or sometimes Abu Hatim al-Razi has problematized that hadith, how can you take that when you're outnumbered? Shouldn't we be following a numbers game and so on? So I was outlining my principles, my methodology. It's not to do with black seed, although sure, black seed is just one example that falls under.
Yeah, just because it's pertinent, people have been circulating this message around that the black seed is a shifa for the COVID-19. It's a cure for the COVID-19.
So you're saying some people saying it was a mustard seed.
Yeah, and in the riwayah of Bukhari specifically, as I mentioned to you earlier before we went live, that none of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, none of the other ruwat besides Ibn Shihab az-Zuhri rahimahullah says that the black seed is the shuniz, which is like the rosebud plant. Okay. And other scholars have said it's thamaratul batam, another sort of fruit or seed, if you may. Some have said it's al-kammun al-aswad, the black cumin. So people are actually not even sure what the black seed is through tawatur, I'm saying.
Pepper.
It could be pepper. So somebody was saying, I made a joke with my sister. We were talking about this aspect the other day. I said, well, if you really want to, apply the hadith of black seed to your life, then, make a milkshake or something out of all these peppers and these spices and just gobble it up, as a joke, of course.
Don't try
going back to your, going back to your kalam about dissecting the matan, right? Dissecting the actual text of the hadith, analyzing it. Another fun fact that I stumbled upon was in my research of analyzing what the actual black seed is, I came across some research of an Iraqi doctor who said that والحبة السوداء الحبة السوداء تختلف من مكان إلى مكان. He said that the black seed differs from one region to another, even geographically. So he says, for example, he says الحبة السوداء في السودان غير حبة السوداء في يمن. Right?
That depending on the region, people are interpreting this to be an entirely separate substance, really.
And and then both those, the black seed of Sudan is different from the black seed of Yemen, and then the black seed of Yemen is different from the black seed of Jordan, and it actually even has a different name. And then all that is different from the black seed in Sham. This is what he's mentioning in his research, and further research also proves that the black seed was not even native to the land of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was actually
that was a fascinating. Tell us about that, because that's a fascinating question that I actually was once thinking. That I wonder, when they're saying all this particular Kalonji and so on, was this even there?
Yeah, if you're taking Kalonji into conversation, if you're talking about Kalonji or Al-Habbatul Baraka, some people in Peoria, just on a lighter note, to sell the black seed, they label it as al-habbatul barakah, right? The
Baraka.
blessed,
Okay.
the blessed seed. So I have the actual bottle here. It says al-habbatul barakah on it.
Mhm.
Of course, to the viewers and to my colleagues later on who might bash me for saying this, I'm not criticizing the hadith of black seed. I'm just basically analyzing the matan.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so what we consider to
I've
be
already
the
said previously, by the way, that I don't believe that hadith to be
yeah,
authentic.
for sure, for sure. Yes, I've heard you say that. I'm still doing my own research
Of course, of
out
course.
of full ihtiram to you, Mufti.
No, 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 absolutely. I was just saying
Uh,
for the viewers so they
yeah.
understand.
So the modern day kalonji, which people are accustomed to taking, I believe that has its origins in Europe, not the
Okay.
Hijaz.
Okay, that's very fascinating. Okay,
What we're
what
calling the kalonji. Wallahu alam. I may be faltering,
is
but
this something you've
I
been
have
reading up on
researched it.
that? Okay, you've researched it.
I read up on it. Yeah, the rosebud plant or the kalonji, what we call the kalonji, it has its roots going back to Europe.
Wow. Okay, that's very fascinating.
Uh,
If be true, I mean that just
if it's
changes
true, yeah,
everything. It changes the
yeah.
entire discourse. Wow.
Uh, uh, uh,
Okay.
Another reason why I sort of want to write this research paper on black seed is people
Mhm.
are heavily circulating black seed to be an actual shifa for the COVID-19. But even when you look at the muhaddithun of the past, like An-Nawawi, Ibn al-Arabi, al-Maliki, and others,
Yeah.
what they had to say with regards to this whole aspect of black seed, they have not said it's a shifa, like in their shuruhat, in their explanations, they have not stated that it is a definite shifa for every cure. In fact, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, um, he says إن هذا العام المراد به الخاص,
Mhm.
that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not saying the black seed, whatever it may be, is a cure for every disease. Rather, he's saying he's using the word kul, but kul in the Arabic language, for even the humble student of the Arabic language, they would understand that kul doesn't necessitate umum
Yeah, of
every
course.
time, right? It's not generic every time.
Yeah.
Ibn al-Arabi goes further on to mention that just as one could not say honey is a shifa for every single disease, in the same way, they
Mhm.
cannot say al-habbatu sauda is a shifa or a cure for every disease. And he actually goes on to mention that honey could at times even be harmful in the same manner. Al-habbatu sauda, once again, reiterating whatever it may be, it could at times be harmful for a person.
Yeah.
And then even when you look at the, sorry, Mufti,
No problem.
even when you look at the text, when we say, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, al-habbatu sauda shifa'un min
لكل
kulli da,
داء.
min kulli. The word kull has been used even in the Quran
Mhm.
as, not a generic sort of, sorry, a generic it's not a pronoun. What
No,
would you call
it's
that?
it's a particle or a harf
Yeah, a
in a
particle.
sense like
Like for example, talking about the wind of Ad, تدمر كل
yes, yes, of
شيء
course. Oh
بأمر
yeah, like
ربها.
فأصبحوا لا يرى إلا مساكنهم. That
Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, this is that same thing that you're saying that when like the concept of metaphor, sometimes we use all through hyperbole.
yeah,
Sometimes we use it as metaphor. Sometimes we use it meaning. It doesn't have to always mean every. Like just as if I said, "Is everyone here?" It doesn't mean is everyone from mankind here. I just mean
yeah.
everyone I'm talking about. Are they here? So yeah, that's
And
understood.
even in general conversation, for example,
Yeah.
if you were to ask me, Yo Maz, how is everything with you?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you have everything that you need for your travel from Toronto to BC?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say Alhamdulillah, عندي كل شيء. That doesn't mean I have the sama. I have, I don't have. I'll basically say yes, I have everything that I need. That doesn't mean I have a nice camper
Mm-hmm.
which will drive from Toronto. to BC, or that doesn't mean I have all the
Of course,
luxurious snacks that I need. Even in
makes
general,
absolute sense.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I've seen this. I totally agree with you. I've seen a lot of this. What I would feel is exploitation of the black seed oil thing, especially in light of COVID. But speaking on COVID and another issue that we've got that's quite pertinent,
Mm-hmm.
the arrival of Ramadan. Should Ramadan be cancelled as a consequence of now, I'm not sure if you've been through or you've heard what I've had to say on this.
Yeah, I've
On
heard.
Monday nights. Well,
I went
I've
through what you
I've
said.
kind of given options in saying, well,
Yeah, I went
you
through
could,
that
yeah.
whole
So
clip.
I've
Yeah.
given options. But what are your thoughts? Should we, for the viewers who haven't watched my Monday nights with Mufti, the recent one, I did highlight that. Um, what I've said is you could either just if you want to, you can just you can go ignore COVID, ignore the global pandemic, and just go ahead with Ramadan as it is with the fasts as stated. Or option B, you could fast, but with a timed fast. So it's not, especially in the West where the days are excessively long. So you just fast for 12 to 13 hours. That's all.
Yes.
So let's say you begin your fast at 5 a.m. and you open it before 6 p.m., that kind of stuff. Or you could entirely just delay Ramadan. You could just, and this has then two options. If you are ill, then I wouldn't say delay. I would just say you give your fidya if you like, and you do not need to fast if you are actually ill. But if you weren't ill but you just feared for your immune system, then you could delay and make it up later on in the year. But okay, now coming on to, and I've got a detailed section on that. But what are your thoughts on this, Imam?
It's pretty rational. If a person is unable to fast in the month of Ramadan, they have those options, not even from us. Rather, this this approach has been mentioned by classical scholars as well. If an individual is, say, unable to fast, or if there's some fear, or in my case, if I'm traveling, then you don't have to opt to necessarily fast and put yourself in harm's way. Um, Certain family members of mine are also expecting. I told them from the get go, you don't need to fast in the month of Ramadan. You can make up the entire fasts of Ramadan at another time, or opt for the fidya if you can't basically fast in the month of
But
Ramadan.
what would you advise? Would you say to, if somebody came to you because you've got the imam position, and they're
Yeah,
saying, well, look, I don't know. I mean, I haven't got COVID. I'm not in hospital, but doctors are generally saying we need to keep our immune system strong. Um, what do you suggest we do? Because it is going to be kind of strange on one hand for some people, but
I have already suggested a similar approach to some of the many doctors in my community. We have a
okay.
lot of
What is that?
Muslim we have a lot of Muslim doctors who are in the front lines in Peoria. Request you to make dua for them, and I always make dua for them. They're actually the genuine heroes of our time. Props to them. They're
Of
nurses
course.
and the essential workers. I've told them that if it is difficult for you to fast uh, in the face of what you're dealing with, then there's no worries for you. You just no worries. Just delay the fast for another time. You don't have to be stressed about, oh, you're sinning, or Allah's going to unleash His wrath upon me because I'm not fasting.
Because
Subhanallah, our
there's the
deen is very,
yeah,
very
there's the
understand, and this is sort of the mentality that people have, even in Safar. Like, I'm mind boggled. Some people, they say that no, I'm going to fast, although they're journeying in their car for, say, 4 straight days.
I
Uh,
see.
with that perception that Allah is going to not like it, or Allah is not going to appreciate if I leave fasting,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
And
and there's the hadith that inna Allah yuhibbu an tu'ta rukhasuhu kama
yeah,
tu'ta azaimu, that
Azaim,
Allah wants His dispensations to be taken to the extent in the Musnad of Ahmad there is the hadith that laysa بر
من
الصيام في
البر أن
السفر.
تصوم في السفر. Yeah.
الصيام في السفر. Now, that it's not piety to be fasting whilst going through difficulty with traveling.
Yeah.
So,
So Sham, she's from a Syrian background. It's my
Sham
wife.
is your wife.
Yeah. And despite how
one of your wives.
the only wife.
I think we've got Imam into trouble here.
I don't follow the Laythi madhab.
Well, I was going to before, when we were beginning this live. I was sitting here with my gown on. I was supposed to go live with the gown on. Then I thought, people might say, "Well, what's this lifestyle?" Is he taking
so even when we would travel with Sham, despite the relaxed background that they come from, the Syrians, despite that, when I used to say break my fast during traveling or not fast at all, she would say, "Oh, we're only traveling for an hour. What are you doing? Why don't you fast?" So I would say, "Come on, you're telling me this. You're telling me this."
These bloody extremists. You can't go anywhere with them. Can't take them anywhere.
Yeah. Mufti, when you mentioned Ramadan, the aspect of the Taraweeh comes into. So, man, I'm sort of, I don't know what to say. I saw a post today saying, "Look at this Pakistani Islam." They were referring to, the press conference that happened.
What's the press conference?
The press conference
with Mufti Munib and Mufti Taqi, that we're going to open the mosques.
Yeah, that's actually been, I don't know, that's actually being criticized by their own very devotees in my community.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that they think sometimes that this is like, I don't know, is this a kind of a defiant stance? Like, we need to oppose the government? Is this something... I'm really disappointed in people like Mufti Taqi, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, he's usually very reasonable. I don't know if it's community pressure, but what I'm sort of mind-boggled about, I'm sort of struggling to understand is the sort of group of scholars are saying prayer sunnahs at home, quickly prayer fard at the masjid, but come for tarawih to the masjid.
Right, are they going to do full-on tarawih in the masjid?
I'm not sure about full-on tarawih, but there is a chance of mukhtasar, some, short tarawih. But look at the irony, like, I don't understand this. Pray your sunnahs at home, but pray tarawih at the masjid.
And the irony is Imam Malik actually said that it was sunnah to pray tarawih on your own if you wanted to pray it. It's not even such an emphasized sunnah according to the Maliki method, but if you do pray, you pray it at home. But he said that if people want to go to the mosque, that's fine, but Imam Malik himself never went to the mosque to pray. In fact, he never attended the last 25 years of his life, didn't go to the masjid.
But in their favor, they were actually talking about sanitizing the entire masjid, removing carpets, but I don't know if that would be acted upon, in a context of...
I think they need to sanitize some of those mulvis and get...
I don't know if you read the message that I forwarded you earlier from one of the physicians.
Was it one of those dirty jokes, was it?
No. Yeah, I don't send you dirty jokes.
It wasn't. Then I wasn't going to read it. I mean, I only...
No, on a serious note, I was trying to...
Imam Sahib is actually very pious. Never sends anything like that. Qasme.
On a serious note, one of the physicians in my community, who I would call very pious, actually sent me a message, which I forwarded to you as well, saying that after all these years, these different sects, these different denominations, they've united upon something. And that too is, like, they've united upon opening the masajid during this pandemic.
They couldn't unite
on
dumbest
they couldn't unite on the whole moon sighting. They couldn't unite on, sharing platforms at other occasions.
The other thing they united on.
But they united upon, this matter which is causing havoc among society.
And the other thing that I've seen them previously, like in Pakistan, unite on, this is the second, and the first was when the person in praise of the of that Mumtaz Qadri who murdered the governor of Pakistan.
Oh yes, yes.
And I was shocked that all these sects kind of united on that, and which is so crazy. I mean, it was a criminal act, and they all united on it, and they never unite on anything good. And in this case, they've united on this. I tell you that,
No, it's actually being criticized at a mass level. Another heartbreaking element is I saw a video of a doctor literally bawling, crying.
Okay, crying. Okay.
Crying. Yeah, sorry, we say bawling.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, bawling. Yeah, we say bawling as well sometimes.
He was crying and saying that it was a Pakistani doctor saying these people don't realize that it just takes one individual to infect an entire saf. Some of the doctors in my community, after watching that video of the press conference, and see, if I was to say this from my side, this if I was to, criticize these scholars from on my part, people would say, well, what are you doing? You have no knowledge of medicine. But I'm actually giving you factual evidence from doctors who are saying when a single individual, say with the COVID-19, goes into the masjid and possibly makes sujood, and they are even short in their sujood, and somebody else comes to that same area to pray their salah, they can now go back and affect their entire neighborhood, if not their own families.
Yeah, true.
So this is one of these aspects that...
The question is, though, like, when we say to people that, look, you have these dispensations, like let's say I'm saying to people that, if you want to, you can even delay Ramadan. If you feel. The question is, though, or the issue, not the question, the issue is because we're placing the responsibility of that decision upon their shoulders. Like we're saying, look, if you want to, you can delay. People feel incredibly daunted by that. I have to make up my mind to kind of miss Ramadan, and it's my call. It's a bit like overwhelming. I don't, do you feel that, or is that? That's what I'm thinking. So. I'm thinking that people are kind of overwhelmed by it.
I think level-minded people would go for that, Yeah. They would say, fasting in the month of Ramadan may harm my immune system, or it may harm my health. And they would take that rational approach of delaying Ramadan. I've seen it among my circles as well, among my community members. People have delayed Ramadan or delayed certain fasts of the month of Ramadan for different issues that they were facing.
Mahin Nasim has made a comment about Mufti Taqi and about his teeth. Come on, behave, people, behave. This. I've got a crazy sense of humor, so you're trying to make me laugh.
Yeah. But I am getting a lot of comments from different people saying that people like Mufti Taqi have been sort of forced into agreeing with this matter because of community pressure. But I don't know. I don't understand.
I'm just disappointed in people like Mufti Taqi Saab. I don't know, honestly, what is the game plan with people like that. I mean, there was an era, I suppose, where he was, trying to be revolutionary, come out with new fatwa and things like this, and be that guy in Pakistan. And that seems to have kind of like gone now, subsided. I suppose he did whatever he did. He jumped on the top of this finance thing and kind of pioneered that. And that in itself...
He did a good job, yeah.
Dare I even add to that, he did... I mean, look, I don't believe mortgages are haram anyway. I don't believe that. I've got a detailed video on that. But I even feel that his thing, I would place some question marks. Like he was heavily... there was huge investments. He was the main advisor for, all these major... in the West, you had all these halal mortgages that were done by... high street banks at one stage, so HSBC, Lloyd's, all these people were doing halal mortgages. They were initially backed by, my understanding was the tour was by Mufti. He came to the UK and did all of these things and got a huge funding on the back of that, and it was a few years of a campaign. And then he stepped away and issued a fatwa saying, well, actually, on second thoughts, I wouldn't say do it. But that was, I think, like 7 years later. But he'd taken his huge paycheck. And I felt, look, come on. I don't, look, Allah knows the reality of things, but I just feel that it's naive to assume that human beings are not motivated by, by things, by money, by power, by status. We definitely are. And this thing right now, this is such a crazy, and I'll be honest with you, I really lost all hope in these kind of Molvis and Muftis from there with that Mumtaz Qadri thing. The fact that they backed it and they praised it, that, which was really an act of terrorism. They praised it openly and all attended this, or kind of at least encouraged to attend the funeral for this person.
Yeah.
I lost hope at that stage in these kind of people. And so, I don't know, I mean, when I see this now, these scholars saying, yeah, ignore all of this, ignore what the government's saying, this is religion, this is,
It is a sad approach I'm talking about, I'm saying it's a sad approach based on the evidence that is being related to me by, doctors and physicians who are Islamic, who are punctual, attendees at the mosque. And yeah, it is saddening for sure at many levels.
Yeah.
In the West, in the West, there is sort of that adamance of keeping masajid open as well, from certain groups which are backed by heavy, hardcore tablighi mentality.
Yeah, I don't get what the tablighi thing. Let me tell you something. I was having this discussion.
Sorry, Mufti. Just to finish my thought.
No,
sorry.
no, of course.
My issue with this is when mainstream media picks up on their actions.
Yeah.
And they relate it to be Islam, when we know this has nothing to do with the character or the rationality of Islam. And, after, say, a single mosque is adamant to stay open, and the mainstream media picks up on this, a lot of other masjids who are generally abiding by what the government is saying, they too are also demonized.
Sure. No, I'm telling you, I was having a discussion with somebody before this Tablighi Jamaat thing blew up. It was kind of blowing up. It was erupting, as in relation to this pandemic, I mean. In India specifically. I said to someone that, look, wait a minute, has the Indian government not enforced a lockdown of these masajid? Because they had an ijtima in Nizamuddin. Now, so somebody told me, well, actually, no, they haven't enforced a lockdown in India of the masajid, as in enforced it by the police. So I said, I bet you what's going to happen is these idiots are going to go there, have this huge ijtima, the media's going to pick this up, because the right-wing government is going to play right into their agenda, because the public need to blame someone, and they're going to end up blaming Muslims for the widespread. And that is exactly what happened within a few days. The media was saying that one of the causes for the widespread is these goddamn Muslim people who were having an ijtima, the Tablighi Jamaat. And
when at the same time certain Hindus were also congregating, but the mainstream media there did not, or the biased media, I would say, they did not really pick up on those festivals. But I know
Hindus
people
were doing it as well, but the right-wing media was going to play on this. I
actually know people who allegedly died after coming back from that ijtima, by the way. Through the COVID-19. And this goes back to, the Hadiyun Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the beautiful guidance and gift of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and of course the Quran, which tells us to keep safe. Don't put yourself in harm's way. Rahmatullahi alayhim, but I don't really agree with their whole idea of going to that ijtima' at this very scary time.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, speaking of masajid and the kind of restrictive elements that people have, I know I mentioned to you somebody had actually had kind of brought up with me an issue here in the UK to do with masajid placing certain restrictions and on certain issues, on certain people. And in fact, one of the imams was due to come on tonight actually and discuss that. He couldn't make it. This thing of, he had asked of transgender people in masajid. Now, from on one hand, I know we're talking about a situation before where masjids are being shut down because of the government stance or because of disease, and the scholars are arguing vehemently that no, masjids must be open, they must remain open because God has said that a masjid must be open to all. On this hand, we had this imam from Swindon, UK, who had highlighted that in his masjid there is a Muslim that was a male to female convert to Islam, who was then barred from coming into the masjid, and this was an issue that was very close to heart with him, because he had to deal with it. I mean, what are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, what is going on, and what are the solutions to these things?
I think people have really taken the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not be of much value when they sort of discriminate against people who made certain choices in their lives, which they may possibly regret or they may possibly not regret. They may possibly have repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what they ended up doing, or they may still have their own thoughts. But at the end of the day, if they are claiming to be Muslims, they are claiming to be part of your congregation, why should they then be damned from populating the masjid just as you're populating the masjid, or your followers or your musallin are populating the masjid? In fact, we actually faced one of these situations where a person who changed certain elements of their body
Sex change.
they ran crying. They came crying into the Darul Ifta office, and they were now lamenting upon the choice that they made of changing their gender. So they asked one of our muftis, what's the situation? Am I allowed to come to the masjid? Am I not allowed to come to the masjid? And I like the rationality and reason of some of our scholars who are amazing in their approach without making any judgments on this person. The Mufti looked at him. He apparently saw that this individual was still a male. And he said...
I mean, when you say looked at him, what does that mean? He looked at his private parts kind of thing?
He looked at his face. He looked at astaghfirullah.
I just want to know what kind of assessments are going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
He apparently saw this individual was still a male, all right, from attitude, from the way he spoke, from the features, the lihya, the beard or whatever it may be. And he said, Tub ila Allah wa qum fi saffi rijal. He said, just encouraged him, if you are lamenting upon what you've done, repent to Allah. And if you are worried about, if you are worried about, the fact that if you're allowed to come to the masjid or not, let me dismiss that fact by telling you, or let me dismiss your doubts by telling you, qum fi saffi rijal, stand in the line of the males.
If they've had a male to female sex change, wouldn't you feel that the women section would be more appropriate, or
But
I'm
this
just.
person was not fully
Oh,
changed.
he wasn't fully transformed. Okay, I
Yeah,
understand. I understand.
yeah,
Okay,
he
sure.
hadn't fully I don't know if I'm misusing that word. I don't want to be offensive to anyone. He hadn't fully transformed, right, to the other gender.
Yeah. But if they had, let's say they'd done a transformation, my understanding would be that if they are now female, then that's how they would be in all walks of in whatever departments in terms of being dealt with or going into certain areas, they would be in the women's
And
section.
and
That's what I would assume that.
I believe your view is supported by many majami' fiqhiyya, many fiqhi organizations. They've said the same thing. If a man has totally, if somebody was a male and they have totally now changed into, say, a female, they will now pray in the women's section or where the women pray.
And I
Like
feel
I
it's
said,
the same with
the
things
sister
like.
section, the sister section is different in UK, and the sister section is different in the US, right?
Okay. What happens in the US? I mean, I'm intrigued.
We accommodate our sisters at our masjid.
Oh, yeah. I forgot in the UK they just don't have a women's section.
Yeah. So our masjid is formatted pretty amazingly, where certain sisters who don't believe in no barrier, they actually have a section right behind the males
I mean,
where they
that is
perform their
how it
salah.
was in the time of the Prophet, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
That,
and sort of the conservative, sort of the sisters who take the conservative approach, they have their section behind that which has a barrier. So nobody could object to either or who wish to do whatever they want, when they come to the masjid.
yeah, no, absolutely. I do find it interesting, though, that this discussion, and I discussed with that Imam, that you see, there was the phenomenon of the khuntha, the eunuch, in Islamic
Yeah,
history, and it's discussed in most fiqh books.
and
They
they were always ostracized, right?
exactly, and it's I found that so just shocking to read how the scholars really just they just generally just like they didn't really care about them at
Yeah,
all.
yeah, they
they
didn't.
Yeah, because they were just so sidelined in everything. They discussed the inheritance about them.
In fact, when we study the books of fiqh, sad to say, many of our teachers would make jokes and make fun of these people. And that in itself creates a negative ideology in the minds of the students.
Yeah. Hmm. And because, especially considering that in the fiqh books, they were dealing with natural phenomena. They were a natural
Hmm.
phenomena. They weren't even dealing with
Yeah,
artificial or cosmetic or, it was in
yeah,
an age from hundreds of years ago.
yeah.
So
In other words, what the Mufti is saying, they were born like that,
they
of
were
course.
exactly, it was a natural thing. It was
Yeah,
organic. And yet, there was this culture in the fiqh books where they will write things like, if you go to Bab al Khuntha, the chapter dealing with the Hemaphrodite, um, it states that they will begin often by saying al khuntha la tankih wa la tunkah,
yeah.
that can never marry and nobody
Yeah,
can marry them.
that sort of lurked in my heart all this while along. And people
That is
actually
so
quote
cruel.
those Mufti.
That is so
People
cruel. Yeah.
actually quote these texts to the modern day hermaphrodite, and they say that no, they can't get married whatsoever. And there are medical procedures which they can opt for.
No, but it's so cruel. Like,
Yeah,
how does anybody have the right to
but that
forbid?
based on these ibarat and based on this whole cultism or
Mhm.
this culture. You see in places like India, Pakistan, and many of the Arab countries as well that these individuals, the khuntha or the hermaphrodites, they're born into good families, but then put onto the streets and abused and then utilized as prostitutes and
Yeah, yeah,
horrible things.
it's
And a
horrible.
lot of
Yeah.
this is related back to those fiqhi ibarat,
Mm.
because those fiqhi ibarat, those texts of fiqh, where which ostracize the khuntha. Sorry, these texts actually ended up developing sort of a mindset in people that this is how you must treat the khuntha.
because I genuinely found that so shocking, and I felt that I remember reading that years ago when I used to study in the madrasa, and I thought, wait a minute, that's how can, because if you're saying, look, the sexual instincts are natural instincts. I mean, you could say, well, look, there's certain channels, Sharia, Islam gives certain channels, just as the instinct to eat. Now you could
Hmm.
say, look, the Sharia would say don't eat pork, but it would say, okay, but eat all of these things. That's fine. You know, you can eat. You don't have to eat meat. You can eat meat. You can be a vegetarian. You can do. Don't drink alcohol, but you can drink all of these things. It's not. There's no deprivation of instinctual needs. Now, how could you say to somebody that, look, oh well, you have no right to sex. Full stop. You just, it doesn't matter if you have an instinctual urge. There is no outlet for you because you don't fit into our scheme of things.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. You can't have a legitimate marriage, but you could be pushed onto the streets to become, for the lack of terms, a whore or a prostitute.
Yeah.
Wal-iyadhu billah.
And I felt sometimes that this was twofold. One, at a lesser reason, was that some of these scholars, I feel that they felt that if we legitimize the marriage, we would have to openly legitimize sodomy, anal sex. Now, first of all, some madhabs, like the school of Imam Malik, did not deem anal sex necessarily
Hmm.
haram anyway. But the other schools, had, because they've taken digs at other schools for this, they would be kind of going back on their own principle, if you like. That's a lesser reason. And I felt another another more power related reason may have been, sorry, there's just that noise in the right. So I'm not sure if you're aware, Sheikh, but historically a lot of the juntas during the times of the dynasties, they were very powerful.
Yeah, they were, of course, historically.
Right, so a lot of, for people who don't know, a lot of the junta, a lot of these Hemaphrodites and so on, they often were closely, they worked very closely with caliphs and kings and in royal palaces.
Yeah, they were like the viziers.
Yeah, and one of the reasons was because the kind of kings and the dynasts felt safe that, well, they're not going to be sleeping with their women.
Hmm.
So this was, but yet at the same time, they've got the strength of men. So, you know, they've got the upper strength to kind of like do arduous work. They could be close to them. They could give, you know, just like, I suppose, just like men. I mean, men could be, obviously, they would have reasonable opinions, but they were insecure that the men might be sleeping with their kind of women folk. Is
Yeah,
that, yeah? I mean, you've probably read that as well. That kind of.
yeah.
So
I've read through
now,
narrations.
I feel that this may have led to a kind of like an aristocracy class of eunuchs, as in that they
Like an
become
honorable class, right?
not so much, I don't know about honor, but I mean, I'm sure it was honorable in its own way, but a powerful class.
Hmm.
I'm more talking about the perspective of power dynamics. Now, this class of eunuchs, that they've become a class in and of themselves, the scholars themselves were always kind of struggling to be a power class in and of themselves.
Hmm.
So you see that the scholars often would, you know,
Okay, I
they
get
would,
where you're going.
so they would often go to, they would try to be close to the rulers, to the dynasts, to in the courts, try to attend the courts, try to be in favor. And because one, obviously it had money in it, but it had power. Now, I feel that, was there a rivalry, for example, between these two classes of people?
Your voice is breaking.
Right. I mean, was there a rivalry between, a power rivalry? That's what I mean, between these two classes of eunuchs, of the scholars, because the scholars were a class in and of themselves. Did
Hmm.
this rivalry somehow manifest itself in the scholarly works. That the scholars write in their books, because they write almost without compassion, when it comes to the eunuchs.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
this is just something, it's just a thought. I mean, I haven't.
Yeah, it is definitely a thought, for sure. It is definitely a thought.
And I don't mean, somebody saying
if it does go back to that rivalry, and if that is actually what took place, then it caused centuries worth of damage,
Because the rivalry here isn't, somebody saying that, oh, well, is this, rivalry between scholars and eunuchs. It's not, I'm not talking about
it's
a
about
physical.
It's going back to position. It's going
positions
back to
of power.
Yeah.
You see, who is closer to the kings and the caliphs and the dynasts and the lords of the time? Who is closer to them? Because the eunuchs managed to get close to them simply because of their anatomy. Because they were men, but asexual men to them.
Yeah.
So
even in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many of them would go into the homes of females. Of course, I'm speaking based on certain narrations. Many of them would go into the homes of the females when other, say, Sahaba radiallahu anhum or general men could not walk into those same homes.
Exactly.
And then,
so
there's that narration of Salama radiallahu anha as well, where there was an individual who was a eunuch or a hermaphrodite, and this individual basically was held to be of that sort until they made a statement about sexuality where they were sort of enticed by looking at a certain woman, and that is when the Prophet ﷺ prevented that eunuch from walking into that home.
I mean, somebody had made a comment here about, royal eunuchs had powerful administrative functions and were a powerful political class. Absolutely. I mean, that is exactly what we're trying to highlight here, and it's had me wonder that was this power element a part. I'm not saying it had to be the sole cause, but was it an invaluable ingredient in the fatwa that were then issued by ulama regarding eunuchs? Because it's always had me kind of always think that it doesn't seem very Islamic.
It's not really.
You read the book, the chapter on these things, and it doesn't seem very Islamic. It seems quite
that's not impossible, Mufti, once again, because going back to our initial dialogue, people to establish authority, or people to gain power, or people who try to gain prominence, if they can make takfir of another individual to keep that prominence, why the heck would they care about some eunuch, fi za'mihim, according to them?
Of course. But really, this ties back into a greater dialogue, really, and a discourse, one to do with roles and responsibilities of scholars, and
of course,
power dynamics in society, and the consequences of these things not being handled properly.
Yeah. For sure. It's something to think about. We really need to not abuse our authority as scholars, which is oftentimes the case. I forwarded a message to you talking about Imam Malik when he was basically approached by, was it Umar bin Abdul Aziz? Umar bin Abdul Aziz said, let's make the Muwatta the official.
I mean, there's a few claims. It wasn't about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, but because Imam Malik would have been just a young boy then. But they claim it was Abu Ja'far al-Mansur.
Abu Ja'far.
And there's some other claims as well, maybe Harun al-Rashid.
And Imam Malik denied that. No, I don't want to make my book equivalent to the Quran, or as a dustur for that matter, as
imposed.
Sort of an imposed element upon people. The author of that article was saying if Abu Ja'far al-Mansur offered such authority to a scholar of our time, everyone would run after that sort of authority.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing really to just sometimes just think about, and I know in psychology this is stressed, especially within certain subsections of psychology, discourse analysis. It really stresses on certain elements to analyze them, and one of them is power dynamics. Where does the power lie, and how power changes within a discourse? But yeah, that is, and even today, going back to this thing of, like we mentioned earlier on, Mufti Taqi Saab making a certain stance, or these other ulama, you can't kind of ignore the power dynamics there, because the kind of grab of power that this kind of like, because when one makes a statement, you see what the subtext is also stating. The substatement is that I am in a position to make this statement. You understand? So there is a huge, because when we say, oh, we want the masjids open, or the masjids will be open, we're announcing it, you're also announcing that I am powerful enough to make this announcement to defy.
Yeah. Despite many medical doctors actually pouring their tears in light of that stance.
Yeah, I mean,
because the medical doctors have seen it. One of the doctors who was actually reacting to that whole press conference actually said, I have hundreds of people who've died in front of me.
Yeah, unquestionably. I mean, to me, it's not so much about, it's not so much, I mean, obviously those things are very important about the kind of actual, what to do to prevent the social distancing and all of these things. And that is obviously very important, and it's inseparable from this issue at hand. But it's the kind of character of these Molvis, of these kind of scholars, to kind of always come back. I mean, it could be a different issue. We could be in a different circumstance. We could be in something entirely different. But they will always kind of bounce back with the negative as a stance of defiance. And I think, like, where does this come from? I don't know if you yeah, but Khair, I mean, it's these things. Somebody said, by the way, Sheikh Mazhar's accent is borderline Irish. Wow, okay. I don't know if it is. I didn't detect that.
I've traveled a lot, so that has probably affected my
if there are any quick questions, we're happy to take them. If people want to post anything, quickly just fire out some questions as a quick rapid round before we begin to wrap this up. I'll just bring this up here as well. Somebody said about the eunuch is not equal to transgender, which is not equal to homosexual. None of them is equal to hermaphrodite. All very different things. By David.
But the attitude is towards them is the same.
Exactly, and
the attitude is that's the problem.
You see, the issue is we're not talking about a mirror. It's not about it being identical or symmetrical. The issue is the attitude and approach are the same, because these issues have similarities. The similarities are that they don't fit in with the normal strata that people have, the kind of schematic structures. Now these things are odd, they don't fit in. So how have the scholarly class reacted to that? They don't, and obviously the reaction is what we've already discussed now.
But I'm surprised, going back to the eunuch.
Yeah.
I have seen people quoting those ibarat, those texts of fiqh.
Yeah.
Even in our time, when when there are medical procedures readily available for somebody who is, say, naturally born as a eunuch, there are medical procedures available that they can opt for. So for some sort of, what they may consider a reformation of some sort. So that's sad.
Right, somebody said fit in, lol. Yeah,
fit
I
in.
get what you mean. No, because I said they don't fit in. And I guess
Oh man,
right. So
I'm slow
let's.
when it comes to dirty
Somebody
jokes.
had asked. Somebody had asked about what was this question? What if someone gets married with the intention of sex? Is that a follow-on from a question about um, the purpose is to have children? Okay, so what can people get married for different intentions? Can they, Imam? Take it away.
Go ahead.
Uh,
Of course, some people get married only for intimacy. Others get married for company. Intentions and preferences would differ from one person to
yeah,
another.
and that's absolutely fine. There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong in if somebody can get married. Many people probably
yeah.
do get
Like
married for a sexual. Yeah.
in the Syrian culture, I noticed something.
Mhm.
Um, they would say, well, there's a nice compatible possible spouse or possible husband or possible wife. Let us facilitate their sitter for them. And I found this word very interesting when
Sitter.
they sitter, yeah.
Okay, what do they use sitter to mean?
Like they sort of use it in a context of preserving sexuality.
Oh, right. Okay, I see what you mean. Ah, right. Okay, 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 okay. I
It's
get it.
really
I get it now. I
interesting.
get it.
The first time I heard that, I
Mm.
was amazed.
To be fair, they do use that in a kind of in the Indo-Pak thing as well, in the sense that they'll say uh, that the spouse keeps the other person pure, like unko
Mm,
pak rakna, like meaning that they kind of keep them pure from doing other things.
yeah.
So I have heard similarities, parallels in other.
Okay.
Yeah, but I
Uh,
see what you meant now about satar. Like it's a satar for them, like hunna libasun lakum wa antum libasun
yeah, I'll go
lahunna.
back to Hunna
To that,
Libasul
yeah,
Lakum
yeah,
for
that
sure.
verse of the Quran. Yeah. Okay. Um, right. Somebody had asked, what is saying du'a before going into the bathroom or even in the bathroom? Hmm. Right. So the bathroom issue, Sheikh. What do you say? I'm just
We
checking here.
usually put the dua if we wish to read it and we're encouraged to read it by our families. We usually leave it outside the door of the bathroom because there are certain prohibitions of, taking the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the books of fiqh through certain ahadith as well. There are certain prohibitions of taking the name of Allah in the bathroom. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Sure. I mean, the Maliki perspective on this, that is, many people do say what you said. Imam Malik's response was that you could say a dua wherever, and there was no restriction of saying it within the bathroom.
But
Because
not Shafawi, right? Or
not
in the
they
heart?
no Imam Malik would actually allow, because the thing is that the concept of the bathroom wasn't a concept that really
Mm,
made sense, because at what point does the bathroom begin?
yeah, and especially in that
So
time where the bathroom
there
might have
was no
just
bathroom.
been,
There
yeah,
was just
where
so
the
exactly.
relieving area might have just been an open
So
field.
so to them, so going into a room, so if this wall that begins here is the bathroom wall, then I come in. But what if it was all the way over there? What if it was over here? So this is just arbitrary. So according
Hmm.
to Imam Malik, it was simply the act of relieving yourself. Before that, you could say, like, if you want to say a particular dua or bismillah or a'udhu billah or whatever, but it's not during relieving. You don't say the name of Allah. But it wasn't about the room. The room in and of itself made no. And Imam Awza'i as well, I believe, was of that understanding. And Imam Malik also, which I actually found strange, believe it or not, even as a Maliki, he was of the understanding that there was no problem in if you had a ring that had the name of
The name.
Allah on it.
Interesting to
He
know.
said that not only could you take it into the bathroom, but you were not obliged to remove it, even if you were going to be using the toilet and then obviously with your hands having to clean yourself. He felt that there was no obligation to, because it would just be an awkwardness and like an inconvenience having to remove your rings, which to be fair I personally find that quite difficult as a fatwa, but it is the ruling of Imam Malik. um, Yeah.
So that might give ease to one of our uncles in our community who, after facing difficulties in relieving themselves,
Yeah.
they say Allahu Akbar.
Somebody
Yeah.
asked about speaking on the toilet. You can actually, it's not haram to speak whilst on the toilet. It's although there is this cultural thing that you better not speak. You.
It is sort of disliked based on certain texts, right? Like certain hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned when one of you or when two of you go to relieve yourselves, don't converse with one another.
Yeah, but true. But I don't think personally those things are sahih. I think the chains, those hadith generally. I don't just mean from my criticism. They
Sure.
generally are not very kind of reliable hadith. But that said, there is a culture where people say, well, you shouldn't be, you're relieving yourself, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do this. But it's not haram generally. It's not like, not generally, it isn't haram. Whether it's from the etiquettes of going to the toilet or not is something else, I guess.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, what about speaking when naked? Yeah, there's nothing, no objection on.
Yeah. Going back to, the sleeping method of the time of the Prophet ﷺ, usually they slept unclothed, right?
Yeah, most people then.
And they would have
أن تضعوا
discussions.
ثيابكم, in fact,
Yeah.
in the Quran, it highlights their practice.
For sure,
They would
for sure.
take their clothes off as they slept. It was
And there are conversations
climate.
even in that situation reported from the Prophet ﷺ.
Of course, clothing has nothing to do with speaking. For God's sake, that would be absurd. If God
Yeah.
was to say, oh, nobody's allowed to speak if they can't. That would just be crazy.
Even
Right,
even during intimacy, a husband and wife would be just mute.
Okay, on that note, are people allowed to, since they're allowed to be having discussions, are they allowed to be having regular kind of, the kind of talk that happens during sex? Is that,
Why
I've
not?
got no idea, but innocent people like us wouldn't know these things, but
What?
is that stuff,
You're putting the load on me.
it's, all that kind of, people say all this kind of dirty talk and things like this. What's the ruling on that then? If they're
There's
not going to
nothing
be
wrong with that. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that.
You naughty.
Yeah. By the way, a lot of my youth group has picked up on that you naughty, and they really appreciate that meme.
I think that
They said we need to have the Shaykh come to our community.
Somebody said it shouldn't be vulgar. What if it is vulgar? What if people want, sometimes during intimacy they would say, they'd want to be called, like they would say, call me this, call me. Is that okay? Because let's say, even though in a non-intimate situation that word would be offensive, let's say, calling somebody something like that, but in this situation, like all these words are used, like people, like you said earlier on about whores or a prostitute. Well, I suppose prostitute is a bit of a formal word, but hoe or whore or the B word, referring to girls.
What comes to mind when you mention this is one of the principles of fiqh, where if a person is to take an oath that they won't hit their wife, and during intimacy or during sex they hit their wives, right? They hit their wife, not wives. They hit their wife, then they won't become hanith, meaning they will not nullify the original promise that they took, because the intent is intimacy and not abuse. This isn't usul shashi, by the way.
No, it makes no. That does make, for people who didn't understand that. Just so you understood it, that if a person had taken an oath, there's so much discussion of oaths, by the way, in the old fiqh books, ain't there? They just get carried away with this oath business. So if a person took an oath that I wouldn't raise my hand, but then let's say to his wife, it could be the other way as well, but generally it's stated that way in the books. But let's say he playfully or during intimacy he did. It mentions, like, let's say he pulled her hair, or if he did things like this, or hit her. Right, that would, without going into much details, unless Imam Saab wants to just in the air do a demonstration of how how
Astaghfirullah.
spanking works. So they say that that wouldn't be a violation of the oath. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's interesting. And to be fair, a lot of the old ulama were very open when discussing these kind of masail.
yeah.
Um, they
Including
were,
the greats, including the giants like Imam Abu Hanifa speaking about foreplay and whatnot. They were very open. I think there was not no shyness in that whole sexual culture in that time. The
didn't they
sort of
just view sex as a very natural phenomenon, full stop?
of
I know
course,
it's
like
natural.
going,
No, I know it's
like
natural.
eating or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Like that today, it is obviously still natural as in part of nature, but it's not seen. It's still a very sensitive, even though in the West we're very liberal and liberated, but it's
Even
still
then,
seen as a very kind of. It's got a lot of. I'm trying to think of a better term for it, really, but it's not seen casual
it's
or.
it's sort of, to talk about it is taboo. One could say
Mm,
it's a tabooed subject. And I've seen this among the Indo-Pacs, the Africans, the Arabs,
yeah,
all out.
but some
Like
less than
they
others
lost that
because
culture
I've seen Arabs sometimes still less. I mean, you're right; they're still very sensitized, but less
Yeah,
than the
yeah,
Indo-Pak.
for sure. It's true.
Because
Uh,
I
some
remember
of
being in Damascus in the masjid,
Yeah,
and after subah, I remember the imam turning around and he did a dars. He sat down after salah and he read some hadith, and as he would, and he would just give a few words and commentary. And one of the hadith was about something to do with. There was a different hadith, and then one of them was to do with intimacy. And then he just said, like, because it's very casual, like they would say, oh, إذا جامع, not أحدكم إذا جامع الرجل امرأته فل,
yeah.
if a man has sex with his wife, then he should do this, this, this. Now, even saying it like that in an Indo-Pak community is very, um, it's
It is
very, very
taboo.
uber
It is
taboo. I
taboo.
think it's ultra taboo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A similar thing happened in one of our gatherings where there was a dispute between the husband and the wife, and
Okay.
they were sort of discussing certain personal aspects with regards to the mahar. And one of the questions that the qadi, an
Mm-hmm.
Arab sheikh,
Mm-hmm.
actually ended up saying, "Hal dakhalta biha," in front of the entire majlis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this,
Like, have you penetrated her? As
yeah,
in, have you consummated the marriage?
yeah, and even yeah, among the Syrian culture, they call um, what some people like to call the first night,
The
or some
dukhla,
people,
isn't it?
yeah, Laylatul Dukhla.
I mean, that's amongst general. Many Arab countries call it the dukhla, yeah,
Hmm.
which is literally the penetration.
The night of penetration. Yes.
Hey, but these Arabs have this thing that that they give out the cloth with the blood on it, and they
No,
all take it around.
not.
So
I haven't seen that among.
so many Arabs
Yeah.
have that in different countries. I'm telling you that what they
No,
do is
I
they all
think it's. I think it's a
wait outside the room. So there's going to be
lot
all
of
these
Pakistanis
ladies.
have that as well. A lot of Indians have that too.
No, no,
I'm
no,
telling you, I've seen. I spoke. I had
no, not like
conversations
that.
with.
Not with people will, for example, they will wait outside a room in the entire house. They'll pack out the house, and the guy and the girl go in the room, and then they've obviously do the deed. And then what happens is the guy takes the white bed sheet and passes it through the door, and then they all kind of pass it round, and they do the I don't know how they do the screams,
Yeah. Yes.
right. So they do all of these, and that goes right through, like from the Middle East right across North Africa. I mean, the Arab countries
Mm,
as a whole seem to have, and I find that so, like, what the hell is that about?
yeah. What if she does, and then when she doesn't bleed, she's ostracized, right? That does happen.
I've heard of cases where the guy will just cut himself somewhere, or the girl will, like to kind of save face really and save grace for her,
Mm,
and just kind of like have that drop that blood. And I mean, nowadays I suppose there's even hymen kind of what do they call them? Kind of replacement, reconstruction, hymen
Yeah.
reconstruction.
Sad what people do based on, their cultures and their
It's very disappointing.
negative
But I
mindset.
find that so shocking as a, if somebody told you that in a Muslim culture there's things like that, you'd think, nah, no way.
Yeah.
And definitely not that widespread. But it is,
Sorry.
yeah.
My computer's dying.
Is it? Okay, cool. Well, you know what? It's been awesome. Are there any? Would you like to wrap up with some words, Shaykh? And if there's something you'd like to say, and by the way, before and then we'll kind of bring it.
I would just like to, send my love out to the people out there, and really at this difficult
That's the
time.
best thing to say just after speaking about sex.
Oh, come on, Mufti. You made this whole thing ironic, man.
I want to send my love out there to people.
And just
I want to do that as well. How do I do this?
Just to encourage them to really value family amidst this difficult time. Many people are saying, I've only gotten to understand my father and mother after COVID-19. So value your family. Wives are saying, and husbands at the same time are also saying, we've only understood what we mean to one another, or we've only understood what family time means after this trial of the COVID-19. So, really value your family, look out for them, make them your priority, embrace them whenever you can, and just understand that they are a gift given by God to you.
That's an amazing, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
And whatever the crisis or the situation, and there need not be a crisis.
Yeah.
You can just seek out these opportunities to make memories, people.
Yeah, I would also, many masajid in the US are already doing it, but I would really encourage masajid worldwide, especially in the Western countries, to really reach out to the interfaith community. Really reach out, not for the sake of just da'wah. Get to know them as human beings. Appreciate them and look after them at the time of their needs, just as you look after. In many cases, you don't even look after your own in the time of needs, but look after these people. They are your neighbors. They are valuable. I was just telling Mufti before we went on live, our masjid actually facilitated and will continue on facilitating during this time meals and resources for people who are facing abuse, and they are locked up at centers of prevention for abuse. Our masjid is actually reaching out to these people and the neighboring churches at the time of their crisis, and maybe synagogues. Our masjid is doing their part in reaching out to them as well.
Somebody had mentioned that, just on as a quick note, that domestic violence seems to have risen due to the lockdown.
Yeah, it has. It has, unfortunately, certain contexts, which shouldn't be the case. I personally found myself valuing my family more amidst this COVID-19 pandemic, not to self-praise.
Imam is a legend. You see, these are the real men out there that, when they say, where are the men gone? This is where in my list so far, I only had two people that in our group that we would say, we only know two people that we could say they're actually decent guys. Now there's a third, Imam Maz. We got to put him.
Shukran for...
Oh man, it's been awesome. People, shukran for hanging in there, even though today was a late one. I did think it was important because
I'm actually drained. Forgive me.
No, it was absolutely awesome. Yes, I am reading the comments as well, but I don't disrupt sometimes the flow of the conversation with the comments, but I do read them. It was incredibly important because the software had been, not the software, the actual hardware. I've done all this rewiring. You guys can't see it here, but there's all wires everywhere. I've got to tidy this up tomorrow. So I wanted to make sure it works, and it took forever trying to work around these firewalls and everything. But Yeah, so people, shukran once again. Tomorrow I hopefully will have Doc Imran from Metroflex Gym on. So we're going to be having an interesting discussion then. Till then, people, you can take very good care of yourselves. Once again, shukran Imam Saab for really. It's been an
Jazakallah khairan for
absolute
the
pleasure.
opportunity,
It's
Mufti.
been incredibly beneficial. So shukran,
Barakallahu
hayakumullah,
feek.
people. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala. I'm going to put up once again all my social media feeds. Like them, people. Share them. Spread the love, as Sheikh Maz said. Spread the love. But spread it in a way that that is not dangerous, you know. All right, people. Over and out.